I'm sitting on the porch, just staring at my phone, the screen glowing the cold December evening, and all I can think is, I've had enough. It was my own damn flesh and blood. Who did this to me? My son's wife, Madeline. She'd always been a bit of a cold fish. But this was something else. You see, a few hours ago, I'd stumbled across a post on Facebook. My post, or rather, the one she wrote about me. Old, senile, and a constant complainer. That's how she described me. All because I dared to challenge her when she started making up rules for parking in our neighborhood. She was the president of the HOA, and her little power trip had been getting under my skin for weeks. But to have her go and call me senile in front of everyone, after all these years of being the one who raised her husband, that was a line I couldn't just ignore. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I tried to call her. No answer. Typical. She's not even going to give me the decency of a conversation. I thought. The rage was building in my chest. But then I realized something. What she didn't know was that I had a plan. And I wasn't just going to let her get away with this. No, I wasn't some old man who could be pushed around. And I wasn't going to sit quietly while she wrecked my reputation just to keep her little HOA throne. That post was a mistake, and that was when it hit me. She had no idea what was coming next. So I stood up, the cold wind biting my face, as I walked towards my neighbor Isaac's house. Isaac was a tech guy, a real smart one, and he was going to help me uncover something that would make her regret ever messing with me. Then I'd make sure she knew exactly who she was dealing with. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling of anger that was gnawing at me. I had never been the type to back down, especially not when my family was involved. But this was personal. Madeline had crossed a line that I could never let slide. So I called Isaac Keller. The guy was a bit of a recluse, but he knew his stuff when it came to technology. We'd never really been close, but when I told him what had happened, he didn't hesitate. "I can help you with this, Christopher," he said. "Let me dig around. I've got a few tricks." I could hear the clicking of his keyboard in the background, even through the phone. Isaac wasn't like the rest of us. While I spent my days in the physical world, fixing houses, building things, getting my hands dirty, Isaac was a wizard with anything that plugged into a wall. Tech guy. That's how I always thought of him. But right then, he was a guy who could help me get back at Madeline. About an hour later, he called me. His voice was calm, but I could hear the excitement in it. "I've got something for you," he said. "I've been looking through the HOA financials. You're right, Christopher. She's been skimming off the top for months." I felt the blood rush to my head. Madeline, the woman who had called me a fool, a senile old man, she'd been taking money from the very people she was supposed to be serving. $11,500, Isaac said, all spent on vacations, shopping, dinners. Her personal crap. She was using the HOA funds like her personal piggy bank. "That's just the beginning," Isaac said. "There's more, but I think you get the idea." And just like that, the world had tilted in my favor. I had the proof. I didn't need to yell or shout. I didn't need to storm into her house and demand an explanation. No, I was going to play this one cool. And when the time came, I'd show the world exactly who she really was. But first, I had to make sure I did it right. The evidence was everything. One wrong move, and she'd slither out of it like she always did. So I set my phone down, stared at the evidence on the screen, and thought to myself, now it's time to show her what a real mistake looks like. It was the morning of December 24th, Christmas Eve, a time when people should be gathering with their families, sipping hot cocoa, and talking about good memories. But I wasn't thinking about any of that. No, I was too busy looking at my phone. The evidence Isaac had sent over was now in my hands, and every detail of Madeline's theft felt like a dagger in my gut. How could she do this to me? To all of us? The irony of it all hit me hard. She'd been calling me senile, all while she was stealing from the very people who trusted her. And she thought she could get away with it? Hell, she thought she could get away with anything, didn't she? It had become clear to me. She was a bully, and I'd had enough of being pushed around. I picked up my phone again, tapping the screen. "Post it," I told myself. Let the world know what kind of person Madeline truly was. That feeling of justice was starting to burn inside me. No more silence. No more taking the punches. It was time to expose her for fraud she was. I started to type. The words were easy. Too easy. This is what happens when you put someone like Madeline Shaw in charge. She's been using HOA funds for personal expenses, taking money that belongs to everyone in our community. $11,500 for vacations, shopping, dining out, while she calls me senile and out of touch to the whole neighborhood. Well, here's the truth. I clicked post. The words appeared on my screen like a bolt of lightning. The moment I hit that button, there was no turning back. My heart was pounding as I stared at the screen. Comments started popping up almost immediately. Neighbors, friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years, all liking, sharing, and commenting in support. It felt good. Too good. For once, I wasn't the one being looked down on. For once, I was the one with the power. Then my phone rang. It was a private number. My gut twisted. I knew who it was before I even answered. Christopher. Madeline's voice came through, sharp and full of anger. What the hell did you just do? Her words were like nails on a chalkboard. But I wasn't scared. Not anymore. I held my ground, calm, cool, collected. I did what needed to be done. I said, my voice low. You've been playing a dangerous game, Madeline. And now everyone knows the truth. I could hear her breathing hard on the other end. And that's when I knew. I had her. Don't you dare think this is over, she snapped, her words full of venom. I'll take you to court, Christopher. You'll regret this. I smiled. Go ahead. I'm waiting. And with that, she hung up. But I wasn't worried. I had everything in my corner now. The battle had begun, and I wasn't going to lose. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. The post I'd shared was spreading like wildfire. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out to thank me. They were angry, disgusted by Madeline's actions, and they weren't holding back. It was like a dam had broken. In the middle of all this, though, there was a weird sense of calm that washed over me. I'd been pushed to the edge, but now, for the first time in a long while, I was in control. That evening, just before dusk, there was a knock on my door. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Madeline and Owen, of course. They stood there, both of them with a look of anger mixed with confusion, as if they couldn't believe what had just happened. Christopher, Madeline snapped, her eyes burning with fury. You've made a huge mistake. You have no idea what you're doing. It was a late afternoon when I made my move. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the quiet street of Maplewood Meadows. The kind of quiet that had always made the neighborhood feel safe, until now. Rhea had no idea that her world was about to crumble, and I was the one who was going to bring it down. I didn't waste time. I posted the evidence. The bank transfers, the receipts for luxury hotels, dinners at fancy restaurants, all linked to the HOA fund. I even included screenshots of emails where Rhea had planned the whole thing, using the community's money for her own personal indulgences, all while acting like she was a saint keeping everything in line. The post was simple, to the point. No embellishments, just facts. The next few hours felt like a blur. I refreshed my phone every few minutes, watching the likes, comments, and shares explode. Neighbors, friends, people who'd always been polite but distant. They were all reacting. Some were in disbelief. Others were furious. But what really struck me were the comments from people who trusted her, the ones who had no idea, who had thought Rhea was doing everything for the good of the neighborhood. Their shock, their outrage, was almost palpable through the screen. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the betrayal, about the lies she'd told them, the way she had manipulated them for her own gain. I kept watching, a cold satisfaction bubbling up inside me. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Rhea had no idea what hit her. She thought she could tear me down, but all she'd done was light a fire that was now burning her own house down. By the time I put my phone down, I knew the damage was done. The floodgates had opened, and there was no going back for her. No more hiding behind a mask of respectability. Rhea had been exposed for who she really was. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to make sure she understood this wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice. The people she'd wronged deserved to know the truth, and that truth was about to come crashing down on her. It didn't take long for Rhea to react. By the time I woke up the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages, calls, notifications. It was like the whole damn neighborhood had turned against her overnight. And when I saw her name pop up on my screen, I knew what was coming. Mortimer. Her voice was seething to the phone, but there was a slight tremor in it. What the hell did you do? I could almost picture her standing in her perfect little living room, pacing back and forth, her hands trembling as she tried to hold it together. But she wasn't fooling anyone. People had already seen the truth. You think you can just go around stealing from the people who trusted you? I said, my voice calm but cold as ice. This is what happens when you mess with the wrong person. She was quiet for a second, probably trying to process the mess I just dumped on her life. Then she snapped. You're going to regret this, Mortimer. You have no idea what you've done. I smiled to myself, feeling that familiar satisfaction of knowing I had her exactly where I wanted her. But Rhea wasn't done. She had one last card to play, a desperate card. Within minutes, she and Clement were at my door. Their faces were a mix of anger and panic, the kind of look people get when they know they've lost control. Clement didn't speak much, standing behind her, looking like he'd been dragged into this mess against his will. But Rhea, she was full of fire. Take it down, Mortimer, she hissed, eyes blazing with rage. You have no idea what you're starting. This isn't just some petty vendetta. This is going to get ugly, and you're going to regret crossing me. I didn't flinch, not even an inch. You wanted to take it down? What are you going to do, Rhea? Call the cops? I've got all the proof. You can't run from this. She was shaking now, the anger in her eyes replaced by a flicker of fear. You're playing with fire, old man, and when it burns, it'll burn you too. I could see her trying to hold it together, but the cracks were showing. The power she thought she had was slipping through her fingers, and she didn't know how to stop it. I'm not the one who's going to get burned, Rhea. I said, stand my ground. This time, the truth wins. They left without another word, but I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Rhea wasn't going down quietly, but she was wrong. The fire wasn't going to burn me. It was going to burn her. And when the dust settled, everyone would know who the real villain was. By the time the sun set that evening, Rhea had already started scrambling. The posts on Facebook had gone from just a few comments to an outright storm. People were angry, real angry. And what's worse for her, they weren't just angry at her. They were angry at themselves for not seeing it sooner. They felt betrayed, manipulated, taken for fools. I couldn't help but watch the fallout unfold. I knew it was only a matter of time before the HOA board got involved, but what I didn't expect was how fast things were moving. I mean, you'd think these people had been sleeping for years, but now, all of a sudden they were awake, and they were demanding answers. The next morning, I was sipping my coffee, watching the chaos unfold when I got a call from Reggie. I told you it would get messy, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. They're doing an audit, Mort. The whole HOA is under investigation now. They're looking into everything, even the stuff that was above board. I leaned back in my chair, grinning to myself. I knew this was just the beginning, but hearing it from Reggie made it feel real. This wasn't just a neighborhood gossip session anymore. It was official. Rhea was in deep, and then like a slow-motion train wreck, I saw her reaction. She posted an apology, but it was too little, too late. It was as fake as her smile. She tried to play the victim, claiming that someone had hacked into her accounts, that the money wasn't really stolen, just mismanaged. She thought she could twist the story, make it sound like a mistake, but no one was buying it. Not after all the proof I'd posted. But the Real kicker came later that afternoon. A letter from the HOA board arrived at my door, and when I opened it, my hands trembled a little. The community wanted Rhea gone. They called for a special meeting to vote her out of office. The very woman who had acted like she owned the place was now being shown the door. It felt good. Hell, it felt great. But there was still more to come. She was going to face more than just an embarrassing exit from the HOA. This was just the tip of the iceberg. And Rhea? She had no idea what was coming next. She thought she could destroy me. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The special HOA meeting was set for the following week. I could practically feel the tension in the air as the day approached. I'd seen it before. When someone's life was falling apart, the desperate attempts to salvage what little was left. Rhea was going to put up a fight. I knew that. But this wasn't going to be like the last time, when she had everyone eating out of the palm of her hand. Everything. I repeated, leaning against the doorframe with my arms crossed. You're the one who ruined everything. You thought you could hide your little secret forever, but now the whole neighborhood knows. Owen finally spoke up, his voice tired and defeated. This has to stop, Dad. You're embarrassing us. This isn't the way to handle things. I couldn't help it. I let out a bitter laugh. Embarrassing you? She's the one who should be embarrassed. You've been living a lie, Owen, and you let her drag you into it. Madeline's eyes flashed with rage. This isn't over, Christopher. You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it. I stood my ground, feeling a sense of power I hadn't felt in years. You can try, but it's too late. The truth's already out. And now you have to face the consequences. They left without saying another word, their car driving away in a cloud of dust. I stood there for a long time, watching them go. Madeline thought she could control everything, but now she was running out of options. And I couldn't help but think, this was only the beginning. The next few days felt like a blur. People kept calling, texting, and stopping by to offer their support. It was like the whole neighborhood had woken up from some long, dark sleep. I never realized how many people had been quietly fed up with Madeline and her iron grip over the HOA. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about power, corruption, and the way she'd made us all feel small beneath her. And now the truth was spilling out everywhere, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. But I knew it wasn't over yet. Madeline had always been a fighter. She wasn't going to just roll over and let this slip away. I could feel in the air. She was planning something, and I had to be ready. That morning, as I sipped my coffee, my phone rang again. This time, it was from the HOA office. The woman who'd been overseeing the audit called to give me an update. Her tone was serious. Christopher, we've uncovered some more discrepancies, she said, sounding a bit more frantic than before. The amount you reported, $15,000. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There are multiple accounts, multiple transactions. It's all adding up to something far worse. My heart skipped a beat. How much worse could it get? I braced myself for what was coming next. There are more records showing over $50,000 worth of misused funds, she continued. We found travel receipts, hotel bookings, even invoices for things like expensive dinners, spa treatments, and shopping sprees, all paid for with HOA money. $50,000. I could hardly believe it. How had she managed to hide all of that for so long? I'd always known Madeline was manipulative, but this was something else. She wasn't just breaking rules. She was living in a fantasy world where she could take whatever she wanted and get away with it. What are you going to do about it? I asked, my voice steady despite the shock I felt. We're filing a report with the authorities. The board is meeting this afternoon to discuss the next steps. It's serious, Christopher. She's in big trouble. I hung up, but I couldn't sit still. I had to do something. I wasn't just going to let this woman walk away without facing the consequences. Madeline thought she was untouchable, but she was about to find out just how wrong she was. That afternoon, I took a walk down the block, trying to clear my head. I passed by a few houses, people waving or calling out to me. It felt different now. I wasn't the man everyone had dismissed as senile anymore. I was a guy who had stood up for what was right, who had exposed the truth, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like I belonged. But I knew Madeline wasn't done yet. She was too proud, too desperate to keep her power. And that's when I saw her. She was parked across the street, sitting in her car, her eyes locked on me. She was waiting, watching. I stopped in my tracks, staring back at her. She gave me a tight smile, but there was no warmth in it, only cold calculation. "I know what you're doing, Christopher," she said, rolling down the window. "You think this is some kind of victory, don't you? You think you've won." "I have," I replied, walking closer. "And you know it." She glared at me, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "You're not going to stop me. I'll make sure of that." I leaned in closer, my voice low and firm. "It's already over, Madeline. The whole neighborhood knows what you've done. You can threaten me all you want, but you're the one who's going down." She slammed her hand on the horn, the sharp sound cutting through the air, but I didn't flinch. I stood there, watching her, knowing that this moment was a turning point. Madeline's empire was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She rolled up her window and sped off, but I didn't move. I watched her disappear down the street, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wasn't over yet, but it would be soon. The days that followed Christmas were like watching a slow-motion train wreck. I couldn't take my eyes off it. The whole neighborhood had turned against Madeline, and every time I stepped outside, I could feel the shift. People were finally standing up to her. The whispers were loud, the faces different. I wasn't the only one who had been wronged. I could see it in their eyes. They were all fed up. The HOA meeting that afternoon was more intense than I expected. The board was officially taking action, and the room buzzed with nervous energy. I'd never seen the HOA board so unified. There were whispers of criminal charges, civil suits, the works. Madeline had lied, and now she was paying for it. I stood at the back, watching as one of the board members read out a list of Madeline's offenses. Everything from fraudulent expenses to mismanagement of funds. It was bad, really bad. And then it happened. The board president paused. He cleared his throat and looked right at me, a small smile creeping across his face. "Christopher, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We've made the decision to conduct a full audit. The community deserves better than what Madeline's done." The room erupted into applause. I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me, but there was still a pit in my stomach. I knew Madeline wouldn't go down quietly. As soon as the meeting ended, I received a text from Isaac. "It's done. She's deleted everything, accounts, emails. She knows the end is near." It felt almost anticlimactic. Madeline's usual bravado was gone. Now, she was nothing more than a cornered animal, and I had to admit there was a part of me that almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I reminded myself of why this mattered. She'd stolen from all of us. People had trusted her. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for the whole damn neighborhood. That evening, I sat down, thinking about all the years I'd spent keeping my mouth shut. Just try to avoid conflict. But this felt different. This felt right. Then a knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. I opened it, and there they were, Madeline and Owen again. This time, they were both quiet, looking more defeated than ever. "I don't know why you're doing this," Owen said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. I sighed. "You never did. Owen, you never saw what she was doing. Now you will." Madeline's eyes burned with fury. "You think you won, don't you?" I didn't answer her. There was no need to. The truth was out there now. And for once, the power was in my hands. The next day, the wheels of justice started turning faster than ever. The board had launched a full audit, and word was out that Madeline's reign over the HOA was nearing its end. Neighbors who had kept quiet for too long now spoke openly about her shady dealings. Even the ones who had once supported her were turning on her, their trust shattered. But as satisfying as all this was, I knew better than to celebrate too soon. Madeline still had her claws in the community, and I could feel the storm brewing. She wasn't the type to go down without a fight. Late that afternoon, as I sat in my recliner, staring out the window, the doorbell rang. I didn't even need to look through the peephole to know who it was. Madeline and Owen. Again, I opened the door, and there they were, standing like two storm clouds ready to burst. Madeline's face was pale, her usual fiery anger replaced with something more dangerous, desperation. Owen, on the other hand, looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were sunken, and the tension in his shoulders was almost palpable. "I'm giving you one last chance, Christopher," Madeline said, her voice low and controlled, like she was trying to keep her temper in check. "Take that post down. Remove everything. You've done enough damage." I shook my head, folded my arms across my chest. "I've done nothing but expose the truth. You did this, Madeline. Not me. You can't hide it anymore." She stepped forward, trying to close the gap between us. "You think this is over? You think you've won? You don't know what I'm capable of." Her words hit me like a slap. The arrogance in her voice was still there, even though she was losing everything. She wasn't ready to admit defeat. "I know exactly what you're capable of," I replied, "and now everyone else does, too." There was a long, tense silence. I watched her, waiting for the next move. I knew she was still trying to figure out how to claw her way out of this, how to shift the blame, but it was too late. The truth was already out there, and no amount of threats or intimidation would change that. Finally, Owen spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Madeline, it's over. We can't fix this." I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw something resembling guilt in his eyes. He had been her accomplice for far too long, but it was clear now. Even he had started to see the damage she'd done. Madeline's eyes shot daggers at him. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "You're with me. You're not going to walk away now." But it was too late. Owen didn't say anything else. He turned and walked off, leaving Madeline standing there, alone. She stood there for a moment, glaring at me with all the venom she could muster. Then, with one last look of pure hatred, she turned and stormed off. I stood in the doorway, watching her leave. It was almost over, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of everything start to lift. The days after Madeline stormed off felt oddly quiet. The entire neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The HOA audit was in full swing, and the results were starting to make their way to the public. Every time I checked my phone, there was more news, more neighbors speaking out, more details about Madeline's theft. People were furious, but I couldn't help feeling a strange calm wash over me. I knew that feeling wouldn't last long. Madeline wasn't the type to go down without a fight, and even though Owen had walked away from her, I had a sinking feeling she was planning something. A few days after our last confrontation, I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The quiet of the evening was broken only by the sound of a car pulling up to the curb. I glanced up, and there she was again, Madeline in her car, parked across the street. She wasn't getting out, just sitting there, staring at my house. I didn't move. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me react, but I could feel the tension building. She wasn't done yet. I knew she was waiting for me to make a mistake, for me to slip up, but I wasn't going to give her that. After a while, I stood up and walked inside, closing the door behind me. As much as I wanted to confront her, I knew better than to let her draw me into another standoff. I'd already won. There was no point in playing into her game. That night, I got a call from the HOA. The board had finished its investigation. Madeline's crimes were laid out in black and white. The amount she'd stolen had gone well beyond the $50,000 I'd originally heard about. It was a staggering sum, money spent on luxuries, vacations, expensive meals, all while pretending to care about the community she was supposed to serve. "Christopher," the woman on the phone said, her voice tight with disbelief, "we've contacted the authorities. This is now a criminal case. The police will be involved." I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of the moment. This was it. Madeline's world was coming crashing down, and there was nothing she could do to stop it now. "I'll keep you updated," she continued, but I was already lost in my thoughts. I couldn't help but think about how this all began. The day I saw that post on Facebook, the way Madeline had tried to tear me down, to strip me of my dignity. And now, just a few days later, she was the one facing the consequences. But it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, about making sure the truth was heard, no matter what. And Madeline? Well, she was about to learn that when you play dirty, you don't always get to walk away clean. The news hit faster than I expected. By the following morning, the entire neighborhood seemed to know what was happening. Madeline's name was everywhere. on the local news, in the HOA meetings, even in the local papers. The criminal charges were being discussed openly, and the residents were in shock. I could see the looks on their faces as I walked down the street. Some were sympathetic, others were furious, but everyone had one thing in common. They were relieved. But relief wasn't the emotion I felt. No, I felt something different, something deeper. It wasn't just about Madeline getting caught. It was about the weight of the past few weeks lifting off my shoulders. The constant anger, the frustration, the feeling of being wronged. It was finally over. That afternoon, I was sitting in my living room, watching the news when I heard a knock on the door. I didn't need to guess who it was. Madeline again. I could almost feel her presence, like an itch I couldn't scratch. When I opened the door, there she was, standing on my doorstep. Her face was a mask of defeat. There was no fire in her eyes anymore, no venom, just an empty shelled woman who had once held all the power. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice low, almost pleading. "Please." I didn't let her in. I didn't need to. There was no point in dragging this out any further. "You've got nothing left to say, Madeline," I replied, keeping my voice even. "You've lied, you've stolen, and now you're paying the price for it. This is what happens when you play with people's lives." Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She had brought this on herself. She had spent years manipulating people, using her power as HOA president to get away with whatever she wanted. And now, everything was falling apart. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, shaking her head. I was trying to survive. I thought I could control everything. I could have given her a lecture, but what was the point? The damage was done. And honestly, I didn't care about her reasons anymore. I was done. "I don't care why you did it," I said, my voice firm. "What matters is that you've hurt a lot of people. And now you've got to face the consequences." She stood there for a moment, as if she were searching for some kind of answer, some way to fix it. But there was nothing left to fix. Finally, she turned and walked away, her head down, defeated. I didn't follow her, didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. As I watched her leave, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had done what needed to be done. Madeline had tried to break me, to make me feel small, but in the end, she had only broken herself. And for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. This battle wasn't just about revenge. It was about standing up for what was right, about taking back control when someone tried to take it from you. And that's exactly what I'd done. A week passed, and things felt like they were finally settling down. The storm that had surrounded Madeline and her actions was starting to clear, but the aftershocks were still there. People still talked about it, of course. Madeline's downfall had become the talk of the town, but now it was more of a whisper than an outcry. She was gone, along with Owen. They sold their house, packed up, and disappeared without a trace. And honestly, I didn't care. The community had been through hell because of her, and now it was starting to heal. The new HOA leadership was in place, and there was a renewed sense of trust in the neighborhood. People were slowly rebuilding, and the wounds she had inflicted were starting to scab over. But even though the damage was done, I couldn't help but feel like something was missing. It wasn't the satisfaction of revenge. That part was easy. What lingered was a feeling that something had been lost along the way, something I couldn't quite name. I sat on the porch one evening, staring out at the quiet street. The houses looked the same Christmas lights still hanging from the eaves, the same lawns that had been meticulously maintained. But it wasn't the same. Not really. The neighborhood had changed, and so had I. Then my phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I checked the screen. It was Isaac. I hadn't heard from him in a few days, and I was curious about what he had to say. "Hey, Christopher." Isaac's voice came through the speaker. "I just wanted to check in, see how things are going with you. I know things have been crazy lately." "I'm all right," I replied, staring out at the street. "It's all over now. Madeline's gone, and everything's moving forward." "I figured as much," Isaac said, "but I thought you should know something. I ran into Owen the other day. He's not doing well." The words hit me harder than I expected. "Owen, I hadn't really thought about him much in the midst of everything. He'd been caught up in Madeline's mess, but I hadn't expected him to be affected this much. He's struggling, Christopher, Isaac continued. He's blaming himself for everything, for not seeing what she was doing. I think he feels like he lost everything, his wife, his reputation, his life. I sat back, rubbing my temples. I wasn't surprised by what Isaac was saying, but hearing out loud hit me differently. Owen wasn't a villain. He was a victim of Madeline's manipulation, just like everyone else. And now, he was paying the price for it. I just wanted you to know, Isaac added. He's trying to make things right, but I don't think he knows how. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of emotions. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for Owen, but another part of me, the part that had been hurt by Madeline's actions, couldn't help but think, why wasn't he stronger? Why didn't he stand up sooner? But maybe that was a lesson. Maybe sometimes people didn't stand up because they were too close to the problem, too caught in the web. And maybe, just maybe, there was some room for redemption. I'll think about it, I said, finally breaking the silence. Thanks for letting me know, Isaac. I hung up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't really over. Not just yet. The aftermath was still unfolding, and I wasn't sure what the next chapter would hold. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a choice in the matter, and that, in itself, was a victory. The next morning, I took a walk around the neighborhood. It had become a kind of ritual for me over the past week, just to clear my mind, to see how things were changing, how people were adjusting after everything that had gone down. The houses still looked the same, the lawns trimmed, the Christmas decorations still up, even though we were well past the holiday. But the energy in the air, it was different, lighter almost. The tension that Madeline had brought had finally started to dissolve. As I passed by Isaac's house, I saw him out in his front yard, fiddling with some wires, probably working on one of his many tech projects. He spotted me and waved. Hey, Christopher. How's it going? He called out, his usual enthusiasm evident. I walked over and gave him a nod. Things are settling down. Finally. How about you? Isaac grinned. Busy as usual. But hey, I've been thinking more about what you said. About Owen. I raised an eyebrow. What about him? Isaac paused, running a hand through his hair. Clearly chooses his words carefully. I know you're still mad at him, and I get it, but I think you should give him a chance to explain himself. He's in a bad place right now. I felt my jaw tighten. I had been expecting this. Isaac had always been the type to try to see the good in people, even when they didn't deserve it. But Owen had been complicit in Madeline's lies for far too long. It wasn't that simple. I don't know Isaac, I said, my voice flat. He was part of the problem. He stood by her, let her drag us all down. And now he's paying for it. That's enough. Isaac looked at me for a long moment, his eyes serious. Maybe, but you and I both know people make mistakes. And sometimes they don't even realize they're making them until it's too late. I crossed my arms. You really think he didn't know what was going on? Isaac didn't flinch. I think he was blinded by loyalty. He didn't see Madeline for who she really was. And now he's left picking up the pieces. Don't you think he deserves a shot at redemption? I paused. The word stung a little. Redemption. It sounded so noble, but after everything that had happened, after everything he had allowed, I wasn't sure I was ready to forgive him. I don't know. I muttered, I think I'm done with him. Isaac shrugged, not giving up but not pushing either. All right, just think about it, okay? I nodded slowly. I'll think about it, but I can't promise anything. We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation hanging between us. Isaac finally clapped me on the back and grinned again. All right, Christopher, I'll let you off the hook for now. But remember, people are complicated. I chuckled dryly. That's one way to put it. As I walked away, I couldn't shake Isaac's words. People are complicated. Maybe that was the truth. Maybe, after everything, I could find some space for forgiveness. But that would take time. Time I wasn't sure I was ready to give. Still, the thought lingered as I continued my walk. Maybe it wasn't about fixing everything all at once. Maybe it was about letting things settle, about finding peace. And when the time came, figuring out what to do next. The next few days passed in a haze. The neighborhood had begun to move on. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something still needed to be settled. Isaac's words about Owen kept circling in my mind, like a fly I couldn't swat away. I knew he was right. People weren't just villains or heroes. They were complex, and I had to admit, Owen wasn't the only one who had made mistakes. I had, too. But then, just when I thought I'd finally put it all behind me, the doorbell rang. I opened it slowly, half expecting to see the usual face, Madeline, probably, coming to try and spin the same tired lines. But no, standing on my doorstep, looking weary and uncertain, was Owen. I felt a wave of surprise hit me. I hadn't expected him to come by. Certainly not after everything. His hair was disheveled, his face gaunt like he hadn't been sleeping. He looked like someone who had been carrying a weight far too long. "Christopher," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "Can we talk?" I didn't move right away. The anger, the betrayal, everything I'd been holding in for the past few weeks, all rushed back. But this was different. Owen wasn't storming in with an attitude. He was broken. After a long pause, I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around, clearly unfamiliar with the change in the air. The house felt emptier without Madeline's presence, without that undercurrent of tension she'd always brought. We sat down in the living room, and I waited for him to speak. The silence between us was thick, like he was still trying to figure out where to start. "I've been a fool, Christopher," he finally said, his voice cracking. I've watched everything fall apart, and it's all my fault. I should have seen it. I should have known what she was doing. But I didn't, and now I don't know how to fix any of it." His words hit harder than I expected. He wasn't pleading for forgiveness, but he was acknowledging the truth in a way I hadn't heard from him before. It was raw, real. For the first time, I saw Owen for who he was, a man caught in the same web of lies Madeline had spun. I was too scared to stand up to her, Owen continued. She had me wrapped around her finger, and I let her control everything. I thought I could save her, thought I could make it right, but I just made things worse. I looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes were filled with regret, with pain. He wasn't the same man I'd seen all those years, the one who blindly followed Madeline, the one who kept quiet when it mattered. This was a man who'd been humbled, broken by his own choices. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," he said, voice low. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I never should have let it get this far." There was a long silence as I processed his words. I could feel the weight of everything, the betrayal, the hurt, but there was something else there too, something I hadn't expected, compassion, because in that moment, I realized that Owen had been a victim just as much as the rest of us. I exhaled slowly, feeling the knot in my chest loosen just a little. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Owen," I said finally, my voice steady. "But I appreciate you saying that. More than you know." Owen nodded, his face full of gratitude. He didn't expect anything more, and I didn't offer it. But in that quiet moment, something shifted. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the start of something. As he left, I stood in the doorway, watching him walk down the street, his shoulders slumped. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of healing for both of us. The weeks rolled on, and slowly the neighborhood began to breathe again. The HOA was under new leadership now, with Isaac stepping in as treasurer. Meetings felt different, calmer, transparent, focused on the actual good community instead of Madeline's ego trips. People smiled more when they saw me. Some even thanked me directly, stopping me on the street or dropping off cookies at my door. It was strange, being seen as a man who stood up when no one else would. But inside, I carried a heaviness. Every time I saw Owen's face in my mind, the regret, the shame, I wondered if I had lost him for good. Justice had been served, yes, but at the cost of my own blood. That thought lingered, gnawed at me during the quiet nights when the house felt too big and too empty. Then came the letter. It was slid under my door one morning. No return address, just my name on the envelope in Owen's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The words were short, almost clipped, but they cut deep. Dad, I don't know how to make this right, but I want to try. I miss you. I'm sorry. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at that note. My mind flashed back to Christmas Eve, when this all began, Madeline's cruel words, the post that lit the fire. And now, weeks later, here I was with a letter from my son, extending something that felt like an olive branch. The question was, could I take it? That evening, I went for a walk. The winter air was sharp, the street still dotted with fading holiday decorations. I stopped in front of Owen's old house, now dark and empty, a for sale sign swaying gently in the wind, a symbol of everything we'd lost. But as I stood there, the letter heavy in my coat pocket, I realized something. This story wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival, about reclaiming dignity, about refusing to be silenced. And maybe, just maybe, it was also about finding a way back, even if the road was broken. The final move wasn't about Madeline anymore. She was finished. Gone. No, the last chapter of the story would be about me and Owen, and whether or not we could salvage what was left. I clenched the letter in my fist and whispered into the cold air, maybe it's time. But I knew the reckoning, the true end of it all, was still ahead. The letter from Owen burned a hole in my pocket for days. I kept rereading it, running my fingers over the creases, as if somehow the paper itself carried the weight of everything we'd lost. Madeline was gone now, disgraced, stripped of power, her name whispered only in anger or pity. She had left Maplewood Meadows with Owen in tow, but her shadow lingered. Then, on February 17th, word spread. They had sold their house. Just like that, the Shaw name was wiped off the neighborhood registry. People celebrated. Some even brought champagne to the HOA meeting. Isaac stood tall at the front of the room, presenting the new reforms, the safeguards to keep another Madeline from ever taking root again. He looked over at me and gave a small nod, and for the first time, I felt like justice had truly been done. Later that evening, I walked home alone. The winter air was crisp, the sidewalks glistening under a thin frost. As I passed Madeline's old house, empty and dark, I stopped. The for sale sign was gone. The windows were bare, a hollow shell, stripped of pretense, just like her. I reached into my coat and pulled out the letter from Owen. I read the last line again. I want to try. My son's words echoed in my chest, softer than anger, heavier than grief. For the first time since this all began, I allowed myself to think not about revenge, but about rebuilding. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into my pocket. Then I looked up at the dark house one last time. That was her kingdom. Now it's her tomb. As I turned and walked away, I whispered into the night, "You tried to take my dignity, Madeline, but in the end, all you lost was everything." And with that, I felt it, a final release, a quiet triumph. My fight was over. Justice had been served, and I reclaimed not just my name, but my place in this community. The rest? The rest would be between me and Owen. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.